Greetings to you all. Welcome to my channel Verbal Skills. And today we are going to cover the most important chapter of grade 12th CBSE board English book Vistas-The Enemy, written by Pearl S. Buck. If we talk about our writer, she is a famous American writer, novelist, and Nobel Prize winner. And very important thing is the full name of our writer is Pearl Striker Buck. Yes, here S stands for Striker. So the full name is also quite important. Next important thing, if we are talking about the settings of the story, it is actually taking place during World War II. As you can see, this is quite clearly mentioned here. World War II during 1939 to 1945, when Americans and Japanese were rivals. I hope you know that during World War II, the Axis and the Allies were against each other. Japan was leading the Axis and the Allies led by America. So this is the basic setting. During this period of time, this story is taking place. Now, next important thing. If we talk about the theme of the story, so this story beautifully depicts what? How a human being rises above all his prejudices to help a wounded enemy. And also, very important theme is it is also showing a wonderful conflict between a man's heart and mind about how people can help enemies on human grounds. Yes, here on such human ground, our protagonist is going to help a wounded fellow. Next important thing, which is really very important, the genre of the story. Yes, the genre is it is a short story. So keep this in mind. The genre of this chapter is it is a short story. Now, next important thing, if we talk about our protagonist, our major character, Dr. Sadao Hoki is our major character, or we can say the protagonist of the story is Dr. Sadao. And the other important characters are Hana, wife of Dr. Sadao, the white man who is a wounded fellow, or we better going to mention him as prisoner of war. Then next important character is the general, a selfish one. The servants are also there. Late father of Dr. Sadao is also here mentioned by the writer, and the kids of Dr. Sadao and Hana. So these are the important characters of this story. I hope clear. So let's start the line by line explanation. Now, first few lines here mention Dr. Sadao Hoki's house was built on a spot of the Japanese coast where as a little boy he had often played. Now here Dr. Sadao is now really very famous, but still who is he? He is remembering his past. So yes, a flashback is going on. Especially here the writer is mentioning the house of Dr. Sadao Hoki was built on the beach area in Japan. This is really very important. Why? Because this place is again, it is keeping its importance. So keep this in mind. This can be asked where Dr. Sadao's house was situated. It was actually built on a spot of the Japanese coastal area. I hope clear. So yes, it is also a rocky beach. When Sadao was a child, he used to play on the beach very often. So yes, he had passed his golden childhood here. So he's remembering his past. So a bit nostalgic beginning here given by our writer. I hope clear. Next lines. The low, square stone house was set upon rocks well above a narrow beach that was outlined with bent pines. So this house was a low heighted, as I hope you know that in Japan, especially low heighted houses are built. So yes, square in shape and built on rocks of the beach, which had many pine trees and was bit narrow. So this is the clear-cut description given by the writer here. Now next line. As a boy, Sadao had climbed the pine, supporting himself on his bare feet as he had seen men do in the South Seas when they climbed for coconuts. So again, bit nostalgic in tone. Here, Dr. Sadao is mentioning one thing. What is that? That he is mentioning that when Sadao was a boy, he used to climb those pine trees which are there on the beach area. Without wearing anything in his feet, he used to climb those coconut trees very often. And in the island of South, he had seen various men climbing coconut trees. So he had learned this art from them by watching. So he had learned from them. So this is a simple description given. Next lines. His father. Now very important one. Now why? Because we need to keep this in mind that Dr. Sadao, he had simply great influence of his father. So his father had taken him often to the island of those seas, and never had he failed to say to the little brave boy at his side. Now what he used to say to Dr. Sadao. Now really very important lines these are. Those islands yonder. Now what is the meaning of yonder? Yonder means there. So he used to pinpoint on those islands and he used to say that these islands which are there, they are the stepping stones to the future of for Japan. So especially he used to say to the boy, the sea there means there. The islands are the beginning of the successful future for Japan. So these islands are quite important. He used to say like this. Now next lines. Where shall we step from them? Sadao had asked seriously. So Sadao used to raise this question that where would we go from there? And then what sort of answer given by father? Who knows? His father had answered. Who can limit our future? It depends on what we make it. Now, very important lines these are. Especially here, father used to answer that nobody knows. We make our own future, and this simply depends only on our efforts. Yes, what is the meaning of this? On what we make it, whatever our efforts are, it depends on our efforts, means simply our future is solely depending on our efforts. So a wonderful message given by father of Dr. Sadao here. I hope clear. Now moving to the next lines. Sadao had taken this into his mind as he did everything his father said. I hope, dear students, as I told you before, these lines simply reflects what? That Sadao, he had simply influenced by his father. Whatever his father used to tell, whatever his father used to instruct, he was taking his command sincerely. That's why he had great impact of his father in his life. So his father, who never joked or played with him, but who spent infinite pains upon him, who was his only son. So here also it is quite clear that Sadao was his only son. So Sadao had great impact of his father on himself. So he had understood and remembered everything, whatever his father said to him, and his father never played with him or cracked any sort of joke, but simply spent a lot of time with Sadao because Sadao was his only son. Now, next lines. Sadao knew that his education was his chief concern. Now, one liner question can be asked based on this line. What was the chief concern of his father? Especially here, Sadao's father, chief concern was Sadao's education, as every parent simply concerned. So here, in the same manner, his father also, he was so concerned about his education. And to fulfill this, what he had done, for this reason, he had been sent at 22 to America. Now, this is important. At the age of 22, Sadao was sent to America to learn what that could be learned of surgery and medicine, so that he can become a famous surgeon. So, at the age of 22, again I'm repeating, this is quite important. At the age of 22, Sadao went to America, and what was his purpose? He went there to learn all about surgery and medicine. So, just to complete his medical education, he went to America at the age of 22. Now, next lines. He had come back at 30. Now, next important one. At the age of 22, he went, and at the age of 30, he came back. So, 8 years of his life he had spent there in America. This is important. Again, I am repeating. This is a value point. Now, next, what happened? And before his father died, he had seen Sadao become famous not only as a surgeon but as scientist. What a proud moment for his father. And this is important. So at the age of 30, Sadao was a famous scientist and surgeon in Japan before his father died. I hope clear. Now, because he was perfecting a discovery which would render wounds entirely clean. Now, why this is mentioned by the writer? As we know, this was a high time during World War II when most of the chief leaders, especially from medical fraternity also, they had to be there with troops, with soldiers. But in this high time, Sadao was in Japan. So this is a question, one of the important ones, that what were the two reasons that Sadao was there in Japan? So first thing, now what is the first reason? As he was working, now what is the meaning of render? He was simply working that how medicine can cure any wound entirely. So he was working on it. He had not been sent abroad with the troops. Also, he knew there was some slight danger that the old general, as I told you, this is also one of the characters. So, old general, chief of the army, might need an operation for a condition for which he was now being treated medically, and for this particular purpose possibility Sadao was being kept in Japan. So these were the two reasons. Why? Because first one, he was working on one medicine which can cure any wound entirely. And second reason, what was that? That general, the chief of the army, was also, he was ill, he was sick. So anytime he was also in need of operation, medical treatment. That's why for this possibility, for this particular purpose, Sadao was being kept in Japan. I hope clear. So this is important. Now moving to the next. Clouds were rising from the ocean now. The unexpected warmth of the past few days had at night drawn heavy fog from the cold waves. Now, present time, what exactly is happening? Now, clouds were rising from the seaside, and past some days were warm during night time, which was not exactly expected. So, because of this, there was dense fog from cold waves of sea. So, meaning that the fog was in the sea, and continuously, gradually, that fog was actually going to cover the entire place. Sadao watched mist hide outlines of a little island near the shore and then come creeping up the beach below the house, wreathing around the pines. Now, exactly what was going on? Because of mist, or we can say because of fog, Sadao could not clearly see the edges of the small island. So, this island, as it was near the shore, so the fog, the mist would slowly come up to the beach area and below his house, and simply, now what is the meaning of this? Wreathing. Wreathing means gradually it was encircling all the pine trees at the beach area. So, gradually the fog was covering the area, including those rocks, including those pine trees, and including Sadao's house as well. Now, next, what happened? In a few minutes, fog would be wrapped about the house too. So, it was simply that chances that this fog is going to cover his house also. And then he would go into the room where Hana. Now we got this introduction. Now Hana, his wife, would be waiting for him with the two children. So we got the introduction of entire family, Dr. Sadao, his wife Hana, and his two children. Now, at the same time, what happened when he was thinking that I should go inside, the same moment what happened, the door opened and she looked. Now, who is she here? Hana. She looked out a dark blue woolen hauri. Hauri is, she was wearing typical traditional kimono, Japanese dress, and on that she was wearing a shrug, hauri, over her kimono. She came to him affectionately and put her arm through his as he stood, smiled, and said nothing. Now, see how nicely here alliteration is used. Stood, smiled, said. S letter here repeated. So alliteration is used here. So she went and she also stood there near Dr. Sadao. He had met Hannah. Now next second flashback. Now here onward Dr. Sadao is going to remember that how and when, means what were the circumstances that he met Hannah and especially where. So he had met Hannah in America. So keep this in mind. One liner question. This is important. So he had met Hannah in America, but he had waited to fall in love with her until he was sure that she was Japanese, because his father would never have received her unless she had been pure in her race. This is a phrase used here, means as he was simply influenced by his father, and his father also, he would never going to accept any other lady. Why? Because he wanted that his son should marry to a Japanese girl only. So when Dr. Sadao came to know that Hannah is a Japanese girl, then only he married her. Next, what happened? He wondered often whom he would have married if he had not met Hannah, and by what luck he had found her in the most casual way, by chance, literally, at an American professor's house. So, this is important. He met Hannah at an American professor's house in America. The professor and his wife had been kind people, anxious to do something for their few foreign students, because I hope you know it was not easily accepted that, especially in America, that if the student is from Japan, so it is really going to be accepted by anyone. So here, this couple simply was, they were so kind to all their foreign students and given shelter to them. And the students, though bored, had accepted this kindness. Now Sadao had often told Hannah how nearly he had not gone to Professor Harley's house. As I had already, you can see this is important, that where, what was the name of the professor? Professor Harley's house. Hannah and Sadao, they both met each other. So keep this also in your mind. So Professor Harley's house, they met, and that night the rooms were so small, the food so bad, the professor's wife so voluble. Now here Dr. Sadao, he is sharing that many times Sadao had told Hannah that he did not want to go to the house of Professor Harley, especially that night. Why? Because rooms in their house were so small, very small. Food they served was also not tasty, and wife of professors, really, she used to talk a lot. Now, what is the meaning of voluble? She was so loud and used to talk a lot. But he had gone, and there he had found Hannah that night. A new student. Now, who was Hannah? Hannah was also a new student and had felt he would love her if it were at all possible. Now, all possibility means he wanted to be sure that Hannah should be a Japanese girl, then only she is going to be accepted by his father also. So this happened. After this, now he felt. So this was the flashback. Now in present time, what exactly is going on? Now both of them, they are standing observing the coast, and they are remembering their past. Now, in present time, what happened? Now he felt her hand on his arm and was aware of the pleasure it gave him, even though they had been married years enough to have the two children, for they had not married heedlessly in America. So, here what the writer is saying, simply Hannah, she put her hand around the arm of Sadao. He was very happy to feel her arm around his arm, and although they were married many years ago and had two children, but they liked each other, so they were very happy because they did not marry in America without any thinking. Now, what is the meaning of heedlessly? Without thinking or in hurry, they did not marry in America. So, this happened. They finished their work at school and had come home to Japan, and when his father had seen her, the marriage had been arranged in the old Japanese way, although Sadao and Hana had talked everything beforehand. Now, first of all, they completed their study and then they came back to Japan. His father, he met Hana. Their marriage was arranged in a traditional Japanese way. Sadao and Hana had talked everything about their marriage before coming to Japan. So they had planned, they knew that definitely they are going to be accepted. So in a traditional way, Japanese traditional way, the marriage had happened. So this happened then. They were perfectly happy. She laid her cheek against his arm. So they were leading a happy life, and Hannah put her cheek on his arm. Now when both of them they were standing, so in such a moment, what exactly happened with them? So this is now going to turn their life. Now what happened? It was at this moment that both of them saw something black come out of the mist. Now this is going to change the thing. At the sudden moment, they saw a black object coming out of the fog, and it was a man. He was flung up out of the ocean. Now this is a phrase. Flung up out means what happened? Thrown out. So they saw one object. It was a man, and it appeared that he was thrown out of the ocean by a wave breaking at the shore. Flung means what? Thrown out. It seems to his feet by a breaker, and he was standing on his feet. Why? Because it was simply, he was thinking, Sadao was thinking that this man had really thrown by a wave. Now what was the condition of that fellow? He staggered. Now what is the meaning of staggered here? The person was not able to walk properly. So he staggered a few steps, his body outlined against the mist, his arm above his head. Then the curled mist means what? Fog, hid him again. So yes, due to mist, they could see only the outline of his body, means the person was not clearly visible. His arms were above his head, and then he was again hidden behind the moving fog. Now next what happened? So this was the condition. Who is that? Hannah cried. She dropped Sadao's arm and they both leaned. Now what is the meaning of lean? They both bowed over the railing of the veranda. They were trying to see properly. They were trying to identify. Now they saw him again. Now the person again, he was visible. The man was on his hands and knees crawling. But this time the person was actually walking on his knees and hands. He was crawling. Then they saw him fall on his face and lie there. Now the man fell down and was lying on the beach, upside down. So he was not visible properly. A fisherman, perhaps, Sadao said, washed from his boat. Now, here some speculation, some ideas Sadao was thinking. He just simply made a guess that he was a fisherman. Probably he was thrown out of his boat. Now, what is that? Washed means thrown from his boat. He ran quickly down the steps, and behind him, Hannah came, her white sleeves flying. So, both of them, they tried to identify. Probably they were thinking that he was a fisherman thrown out of his boat. So Sadao ran down to help him, and Hannah also came behind him. Hannah came, her white sleeves flying. A mile or two away on either side there were fishing villages, but here was only the bare and lonely coast, especially dangerous with rocks. The surf beyond the beach was spiked, means very sharp, with rocks. Somehow the men had managed to come through them, and he must be badly torn. Now, 2 miles away, what exactly the writer is saying, what Sadao was thinking, that on either side of their house there were villages of fishermen, but around his house there were no other houses. So it was the only house. So the sea near their house had a lot of sharp rocks. So still the man, he managed to come through these rocks. And what is the meaning of this? Torn. Torn means that I was thinking the man must be severely injured, wounded. Okay, I hope this is clear. Now next, he is wounded. They saw when they came towards him that indeed it was so. The sand on one side of him had already a stain of red soaking through. Now, what is the meaning of red soaking through? When they went near the men, both of them, Hannah and Sadao, they saw that the man was really badly wounded, injured. On one side of him, there was a red mark in the sand. The blood was continuously coming from his body, and sand also had soaked it and turned red in color. So this was the condition. He is wounded, Sadao exclaimed. He made haste to the man who lay motionless, his face in the sand, because it was not visible. He was upside down, so he was not visible clearly then. Now finally what happened? An old cap stuck to his head, soaked with seawater. He was in wet rags of garment. And Sadao stopped then, Hannah at his side, and both of them, when turned the man's head, they saw the face, and Hannah whispered then, what? A white man? Yes. It was a white man. The wet cap fell away, and there was his wet yellow hair, long as though for many weeks it had not been cut, and upon his young and tortured face. Now, what is that tortured face again? Tortured face means his injured face. Tortured face was a rough yellow beard, and he was unconscious and knew nothing that they did for him. Now, they refer to Sadao and Hana. Okay, dear learners. Now, what happened? As when both of them they saw that he is a white man wearing torn clothes, not in good condition, badly injured, and simply in a low voice, Hannah then said that he was a white man. Means a white man means what? A person from America. Earlier, I hope you know, means person from America, Canada, Australia, or Europe, and many more countries, means with the color white color, means fair color. These people they used to call them what? White men. So when both of them they saw that, they were simply astonished then. The wet cap also got removed from his head. They could see his yellow hair. These hair were long because they had not been cut since many weeks, and his face looked young and it was badly injured. So he had a yellow beard. The beard was rough, not simply trimmed or cut, and the man was totally unconscious, so did not feel anything. Why? Because he was not knowing what this couple is going to do with him. So I hope this much understood. So we'll cover next lines in our next video. So keep connected.